Hello, I'm Scott Turner, and I'm Director of Science Programs at the National Association of Scholars. And this is the Week in Science for the 19th of June, 2025. In today's episode, we take a sobering look at the actual budget proposal for the Trump administration's restructuring of federal support of science. We also turn to some real science. First is some interesting developments in the out-of-Africa migration of our ancestors from Africa into the entire world. It took humans several tries to pull this off, and what made our last try so successful? And this is the 50th anniversary for the release of Steven Spielberg's movie Jaws, and, naturally, the science of sharks is in the news. Okay, let's jump in. The big news this week is the release of the 2026 presidential budget request, outlining the administration's wish list for science funding going forward. From here, discussions will move on to the next phase of congressional oversight, which will settle on the final numbers for the appropriation going forward. But at least we know the starting point. And here are some of the highlights. The big news concerns the NIH, which is presently the largest funder of biomedical research in the U.S. The Trump administration proposes a major reorganization of the NIH. Presently, the NIH consists of several semi-independent institutes that often spend more energy trying to poach turf from one another as opposed to, actually doing research. It's this kind of infighting that Anthony Fauci was a master at, for example, with questionable results for the health of the nation. The reorganization will consolidate 16 of these institutes into just 5. Scientifically, a lot of this makes sense. It's becoming clear, for example, that disease occurs in the context of the whole human body, and not just this or that body part. The new proposed National Institute of General Medical Sciences will fold 6 of these institutes into one, so perhaps we'll get some interesting new approaches to disease here. We'll see. Keeping in line with the Trump administration's general aim of reducing spending on biomedical research, all of the new institutes will have to get by with less money, with reductions ranging from about 30% to around 40% of their previous allocations. Most significantly, 4 of the current institutes will be defunded entirely. These include nursing research, DEI-targeted research, and international collaborations. That last one seems a little harsh. Isn't it a good thing that we help fund health-related research overseas? Well, yes and no. Let's remember that the biomedical research that gave us the COVID-19 pandemic was just this kind of relationship. In that instance, international collaboration was used to hide research activity in China that was specifically prohibited here in the United States. So you can understand the administration being a bit gun-shy about funding that kind of research. The National Science Foundation will face about a 60% reduction in its overall budget. These changes reflect the administration's choosing to spend its research dollars on its own strategic priorities, which include artificial intelligence and quantum computing. This may explain why the one bright spot in the NSF budget is an increase in major research equipment and facilities construction, which reflects those new priorities. What Donald Trump was elected to do. Big changes, meanwhile, are in store for the research programs of the Department of Energy. Again, these changes reflect the Trump administration's renewed emphasis on fossil fuels and nuclear energy, and skepticism about green energy spending, which exploded under the Biden presidency. AOC weeps. Overall, the budget for the Department of Energy's Office of Science amounts to about 14% overall reduction. Not bad, considering the much larger cuts at the NIH and NSF. Again, this reflects the administration's new priorities. Advanced Scientific Computing Research, or ASCR, will have its funding maintained. The big loser will be the DOE's Biological and Environmental Research Program, which will see its budgets reduced by 56%. The really big loser at the Department of Energy is the budget for EERE, or Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which was a major item in the green energy agenda. The ongoing boondoggle of solar and wind energy will have their research budgets zeroed out completely. And not far behind will be vehicle and building technologies, nearly zeroing out misguided programs like electrical vehicle mandates and expensive and pointless building retrofits for green energy. They won't be missed much, actually. NASA is also going to face budgetary challenges, again reflecting the Trump administration's new strategic priorities. The bright spot there is an increase in exploration technology. That sounds exciting. Maybe we'll get to Mars ahead of the Chinese. And of course, the other bright spot is a zeroing out of research programs for, quote, STEM engagement, close quote, which is one of the pseudonyms for race and sex discrimination. There's more detail to be found, but there's no need to drag you through all of that. If you're interested, there's a link to the document in the description. But I do want to end on the one exception to the overall financial astringency that the sciences will be facing, and that's the Department of Defense. The Defense Department is going to see its overall research budgets increased. The big winner here is the Air Force, which will see its research budget more than doubled. Again, this reflects the evolving landscape of national defense, in which outer space and autonomous vehicles are going to be the new battlefield, as we've been seeing over the past few weeks. And we'd better be ready for it. So we'll see what happens next in the back-and-forth negotiations between the affected agencies, Congress, and the administration. One thing is clear, though. The Trump administration aims to bring about a major transformation in the relationship between government funding and scientific research. That's long overdue, in my opinion. So, to quote the Donald, we'll just have to see what happens. Okay, enough with all that accounting. Let's have a look at what's happening in actual science. We've long known that the human species originated in Africa and then spread throughout the entire world. There's a lot we don't know about how this happened, and this week's Nature magazine contained an article that fills in some of the details a bit better. The article is by Emily Hallett and 8 co-authors, which included anthropologists, archaeologists, and climatologists, and it was titled Major Expansion in the Human Niche Preceded Out of Africa Dispersal. Okay, what does that mean? The title of an accompanying news report by William Banks is a bit more informative. Homo sapiens adapted to diverse habitats before successfully populating Eurasia. Hallett et al. Sought to fill in an open question about the evolutionary geography of the so-called hominins, the taxonomic grouping that includes the chimpanzees, and the family of primates which includes our own species. The genus Homo originated a few 100,000 years ago in Africa, as far as we now know. Here's the problem, outlined in a handy map as part of this 2019 paper, describing an early dispersal of modern humans from Africa to Greece, by Eric Delson in the July 10, 2019 edition of Nature magazine. Hominins have been showing up outside of Africa for at least a few 100,000 years. The best well-known of these populations is the Neanderthals, which showed up around the Caspian Sea and spread into southern Europe as long as 450,000 years ago. There's also evidence of Homo sapiens showing up in the eastern Mediterranean and Greece around 200,000 years ago. But the Neanderthals and a related group, the Denisovans, did not spread widely. The out-of-Africa migration that took permanent root worldwide only got underway about 50,000 years ago. Unlike those previous emigrations from Africa, modern Homo sapiens came to occupy the entire globe, displacing whatever other species of Homo existed there. Both the Neanderthals and the Denisovans were displaced by modern Homo sapiens, probably through a mixture of conquest and intermarriage. We know this because Homo sapiens DNA still contains traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA. So, what was different about that immigration 50,000 years ago? That's the question that Hallett et al. Sought to answer. They took the approach of using climate modeling to explore how suitable environments in Africa changed in the run-up to that latest wave of immigration. So, for example, they estimated the range of African habitats that were unsuitable for human habitation at different times in prehistory, in paleoclimates, to use the technical term. In the period from about 120,000 years ago up to 65,000 years ago, the range of suitable habitats in Africa was expanding. And this meant that human populations were expanding as well, so that the highly mobile human populations at the time encountered more diverse environments more frequently. In ecological parlance, Hallett et al. Were saying that the ecological niche of humans was expanding at this time. The ecological niche describes the range of conditions that are suitable for a species to inhabit. Again, in the ecological parlance, Hallett et al. Are claiming that the breadth of the human niche was expanding as a result of Africa's rapidly changing climate. And this favored adaptability, which enabled humans to expand into the wider range of habitats they would encounter when they left Africa. A kind of pre-adaptation, if you will, that enabled this wave of human immigrants to inhabit the wider range of habitats they would encounter in the broader world. Habitats that range from desert to forest to quite severe Arctic habitats. Okay, that's an interesting hypothesis, but it doesn't quite get us out of the woods, so to speak, or, more to the point, out of Africa. Looking at the correlations between likely paleoclimates and migration of human populations is certainly a novel approach to the problem. And the Hallett et al. Paper does a pretty good job of working out the kinks and foibles that go with melding the two. Nevertheless, there is a problem with the whole ecological niche issue that's very hard to get around. Traditionally, the ecological niche has been used to limit what populations of animals can do. Animals can only inhabit a particular range of environmental conditions, and they won't do well outside of that range. In short, the niche is an expression of adaptation of a species to a particular environment. Lately, the concept of the niche has been undergoing its own radical transformation that goes roughly under the title niche construction. In this concept, organisms not only adapt to environments, they're capable of adapting environments to themselves. And in the case of humans, one of the major avenues of adapting environments to themselves is human culture. So, for example, people in extreme northern habitats build unique shelters and clothe themselves in ways that's different from people who inhabit more temperate climates. So maybe the wave of humans that left Africa 50,000 years ago had developed cultures that made them more versatile, more resilient, and, let's just say it, more clever than their predecessors. The debate continues. "2025 is the 50th anniversary of the release of Steven Spielberg's movie Jaws, this week in fact. So, naturally, sharks are in the science news as well. The movie Jaws cemented the reputation of the great white shark as a vicious man-eater to be feared. Well, it turns out that great white sharks have their own top predators to fear. In the waters around Cape Town, in South Africa, great white sharks are quite common. Common enough, in fact, to support a major ecotourism economy. The sharks migrate in to feed off the gathering of Cape fur seals in several large colonies off the coast. A few years ago, the great whites started not to show up. It seems that 2 killer whales were patrolling in the area and were massacring sharks. From the several shark carcasses that were washing up on the shores around Cape Town, it seems that the whales were especially looking for the nutrient-rich livers of the sharks. The shark carcasses washing up on shore had been expertly eviscerated by the whales to get to those rich livers. While lone killer whales had long been known to prey on sharks, these were usually attacks on small juvenile sharks. To take down larger adult sharks, like adult great whites, hunting in packs is required. The remarkable thing about the Cape Town events was that here there were 2 killer whales, nicknamed Port and Starboard, who were hunting collaboratively to both ambush and take down adult great white sharks. That apparently was enough to scare the other great white sharks away. The great, of course, refers to size. The great white shark is one of the largest shark species, and that means large livers, anywhere from 5 to 25 kilograms. That's anywhere from 11 to 55 pounds of liver, which makes them a prize catch for killer whales, even if it means having to share the booty. The killer whale team of Port and Starboard was very effective, as evidenced by the large number of eviscerated shark carcasses that were washing up on shore. That caught the interest of several marine biologists in the area, who got to work documenting other instances of collective predation of sharks by killer whales. Among the remarkable behaviors they observed was that large teams of killer whales cooperated to hunt large numbers of large great white sharks. In one instance, for example, a team of 6 killer whales began to hunt a group of adult great whites. The sharks were aware of their presence and apparently were afraid of them because the sharks began to circle tightly in a defensive group. And the killer whales were very effective at cooperating to cut off routes of escape for the sharks, and the result was a feast day for all the whales in the pack. Imagine all that delicious shark liver. The most interesting thing about these discoveries is the extent to which they've been made independent of the usual measure of government research grants. All of the observations upon which this work depends has been supported by a private charity, the Dyer Island Conservation Trust. The DICT is a foundation established by Wilfred Chevelle, who is the CEO of Marine Dynamics, a tourism business that operates cruises for people to see great white sharks, penguins, whales, and other remarkable features of the marine ecosystems off the coast of South Africa. It's been a very profitable business for him, and he has used his wealth to establish several foundations, including the Dyer Island Conservation Trust, through which he has donated ship time, observers, helicopter flights, and drones to help facilitate those observations. In addition, several other private groups and charitable foundations have kicked in to help support the observations being made by the scientists whose work on killer whale predation on great white sharks was just published. It's an example of an earlier model of research that depended upon networks of private philanthropy of committed individuals, which was the norm before science became addicted to the gushers of federal money that now support it. Gushers that, in the U.S. at least, seem to be drying up. It's initiatives like the Dyer Island Conservation Trust that make me a little skeptical of the gnashing of teeth and rending of garments that are going on over the, quote, Trump war on science, unquote. Okay, that's it for the Week in Science for the 19th of June, 2025. If you have any thoughts, comments, or queries, you can just put them in the comments section. We like to have comments, and we like to respond to them. Or, if you like, you can address your comments or questions directly to me at turner@nas.org. And you can always tell your friends and share this video with your own social media networks. This video and all the videos for the Week in Science are hosted at the National Association of Scholars YouTube page, along with lots of other interesting video content. You can subscribe to us there so you can be notified whenever new content is posted. And there's lots more interesting commentary and articles on a variety of topics at the National Association of Scholars website at nas.org. Pay us a visit there. You might even consider joining us as a member. And if you're already a member, thanks again for your ongoing support. Until next week.